Welcome to Out of Home Insider, the loudest voice in out of home. A lot of people have been asking me about why I joined OneScreen, and today's guest is a perfect example of why. And the insight that he was going to provide is something that we can all use. Everyone in the industry can use it to help clients run more measurable campaigns and do some really cool stuff with. Today's guest is Mr. Christof Jaritz. He's the Vice President of Marketing and Sales at QR Code Generator, an industry leader in QR code marketing. And today we'll be gleaning insight and data about how companies around the world are using QR codes to generate serious engagement and revenue. Specifically, we'll be talking about QR codes used in out-of-home advertising. Christof, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
Absolutely. So let's start and lay the groundwork. Fundamentally, we've probably all seen a QR code. I hope everyone's seen a QR code at this point, but what is a QR code?
So, it's basically just like, a technical advancement from, a barcode, those little things that you would have on, any product that you buy in a supermarket, and the cashier runs it over a scanner and it kind of tells them the number. So a QR code is like, you could almost imagine it like a 2D version, because that is one-dimensional, right, of that barcode. So it can hold more information. It was developed by a company in Japan called Denso Wave, and they ultimately only really use it for industrial, uses. As in, you think of a data or like of a physical warehouse where robots would read those QR codes, knowing where to go to pick up stuff. However, in recent years, there's been more and more ideas around how to use QR codes in, out of home, and just like, for marketing purposes, because, it's just a good way to bring people from an offline experience or from an offline environment to, your online representation. So you can basically put any type of data behind that code that you want. It could be a website. It could be, a donation campaign for Bitcoin. It could be, an MP3. So any information that is not too large, that can be visually processed by any phone now. Android and iOS have both built it into their native camera apps. Can be scanned by anyone, so they can find that information that you want to give them in a very, very easy way.
It's interesting because a lot of the conversation, particularly around advertising mediums, is how do I measure that this thing is working? How do I translate that the dollar I spent in advertising has created $5 in revenue? But it sounds like there's a lot more ways to use a QR code beyond just like, hey, directly trying to sell something. Do you see a lot of companies? Maybe give us a few examples of some of the creative or the more outside of the box ways to use a QR code.
Yeah. So maybe let's start like this. I in my past, I started in online advertising. I worked for Google for nearly 8 years, right? So the typical direct response, you can measure what you do advertising. And I remember, in the early days of, early days, right? We're talking the pre-2010 days, right? When everyone was still trying to figure that out, online advertising was awesome because it was the first way to actually have conversion rates and engagement rates and all that behind it. But the holy grail after that period has always been this, like, how do I get people from that out of home offline context to do something online? To make it more measurable. There's people experimenting with beacons and so on and so forth. So what a QR code ultimately does, especially these days, is it's one of those vehicles that I can use to make my online or my virtual content discoverable for someone in an offline context, right? So they may be in store, right? So they're shopping for something. I've seen really cool stuff done by Luxottica that ultimately own, any sunglasses brand you can imagine, Ray-Bans, Oakley, you name it. It's all theirs. But what they do, for example, is you scan a QR code, you can look at the sunglasses, kind of have a picture taken of your face, play around with it like in a video, virtually try on that sunglasses. So that's cool. You bring someone exactly from that in-store experience and enhance their experience with virtual reality or whatever you might call it, right? The more common use case that you see these days, obviously, with all of us being to more or less extent, depending on where you are, stuck at home. Restaurants trying to figure out, how I can do touchless stuff is obviously, all those touch.
Uh-oh. Oh no, Christof. Hey, welcome back. Welcome back.
Sorry, but I have to cut that. We've been cut off.
No, it's fine. I can stitch that all together. You were just starting to talk about restaurants and trying to do the contactless.
Yeah. So what you see a lot these days is like, restaurants, having to kind of being forced due to the COVID pandemic to do stuff that's less, touchy. Like you don't want to have a physical menu with like,
Right.
plastic lamination or whatever in your hands. And so they're exploring those ways of like, how can I host my menu online? And if you think about it, for that mom and pop shop or mom and pop restaurant around the corner, they may not be like as digitally savvy. It's a very easy way to kind of have a first foray into that. You have your menu hosted online. It's people are more understanding of like, oh, I can scan that code now. Those restaurants are now doing more innovative stuff with it, right? So you don't have to stop at, oh, I'm just reproducing my paper menu and hosting it online, but you can do, again, more interactive stuff. I love the idea of, especially at the more high-end places, seeing something about, if we talk about someone, I know you're in New York, right? Dan Barber doing farm-to-table stuff. Mm-hmm. If I can find out more about the ingredients that I'm being served, where the farm is, I could have a super interactive experience. Like I'm sitting at the table, I'm looking at that menu, I can see where that whatever beetroot is how it's sourced, who the farmer is. You can really have this more personalized experience, maybe even have a multimedia experience around it. And I feel like, people aren't exploring that enough yet. It's just, because again, I think that vehicle of like, getting people to actually easily have an entranceway to that online and enhanced experience hasn't been there.
It's really interesting. I think the point I want to latch onto there that you said early on was that it takes the offline experience online, right? Mm-hmm. And the use of content to build a story, right? Thinking about that, that beet salad and hey, here's it, right? I scan the QR code and here's this cool little 2-minute video about the farmers where we source our ingredients from. Maybe there's a little profile about the farm, right? Where now we're more connected to the story behind the food. Taking the whole thing long tail is, well, then that restaurant presumably can create more intrinsic value in that dish, right? Potentially charge more, have premium drinks associated with it. Like that's a cool idea of the multimedia experience and really using content behind the advertising. But it sounds like there's still a chasm. There's still a gap that we need to cross in terms of education. What sort of categories or industries are you seeing use QR codes most effectively?
Yeah. So let me address that chasm for a second before I go into the industries, right? Because I feel, a few years back, there was this Tumblr of like pictures of people scanning QR codes, right? It was just an empty Tumblr folder because no one ever scanned a QR code.
Like, listen, coronavirus saved the QR code.
Yes. So, it's interesting because so QRCodegenerator.com, we've been seeing growth before that, but obviously due to coronavirus, and we can pretty much track in every country, like where the lockdown measures happened, that we had a massive surge in customers from all industries, right? But I think the more important trend is that consumers of all age groups, of all target groups, are now more familiar with the concept because of our new reality over the past few months. All of us, I'd hazard a guess that everyone listening to this has been scanning a QR code in the past month, and that also there have been a lot of people who have never done it before, maybe, or even if they're tech savvy, understand what a QR code is, but like never really could be bothered because why, right? Yeah. So. And at the same time, there was this gap again to find more solutions that are easy enough to get those people to have those more online experiences to bridge the gap between that. And that is something that is quite ubiquitous across industries. So we obviously the number one industry that we see is actually, hospitality, gastronomy, hotels, restaurants. But then there's a lot of things around real estate, retail, obviously, I love the idea of appointment booking via QR code, no matter what service you provide, like from, that has become a lot more important during COVID as well. Like if you don't want to, you're going to the hairdresser, you can't have 10 people in there at once. You have to kind of, have some hygiene protocols and stuff like that. So I see that a lot more as well in like beauty salons, spas, and so on. Scan the code, book your slot, come by when the time comes, so you don't have to interact unnecessarily with people and expose your risk. And I think that's not just that is something where people now notice, oh, this is kind of convenient. I want to be doing this even after all of this is over and we can leave our homes again. And it's just, it's a nice way to do it.
Right. Like I don't have to call, sit on hold. I control my experience and probably done faster than if I called in and tried to make that appointment. That's interesting. It makes a lot of sense. Do you see any use cases that are over indexing in terms of performance? Is it appointment booking? Are you seeing other types of engagement with QR codes that do particularly well?
So it always obviously depends on the brand that is using them, right? So it helps if you already have a recognizable brand in the sense of like you have the user base that will actually scan it, right? So one of the things that I see around the corner, like we just had a Five Guys opening here, which their European expansion is going on. So they literally just opened here right in the middle of Berlin. And their location, I think, was opened a month before the pandemic really hit. So that's a tough one to kind of get started.
Yeah.
But what they've been doing, and I think they're doing it at most of their restaurants now, is you scan a code, you put together your burger, you put together your order, and then you go in and use it there. And that has been used, as far as I can tell, massively. Every time I walk past there, I see people scanning that, doing that, standing out there with your phones. You can tell. They're building their burgers. They don't have to go to a person, tell them the order, and so on. It's similar to what McDonald's does with those physical displays that they let you do the whole order. If you think about it as well from a hardware perspective, if that's something that you do and you don't have to put those displays in, but you get people to do it on their phones.
No kidding.
Way easier.
And operationally, it must create a high degree of efficiency because now I'm not limited by the capacity of one person taking an order and I've got a line of 15 people, right? So customer experience is better. I'm able to get what I want faster, quicker, easier. I didn't have to wait in line. I just placed my order. But then from a business standpoint too, I'm more efficient. Right. I'm receiving these orders and I can parse out the work and accomplish these tasks in a more efficient way. And that's really interesting. You talked there about a brand that's established using a QR code versus maybe a brand that isn't established. How do you broach the conversation around expectations of clients using QR codes in advertising? How do you parse that conversation out in terms of what they should expect?
I mean, it's important to note that as a business, we are super SMB driven, right? So the majority of our client base, yes, we have a lot of really interesting brands in there, a lot of Fortune 500 companies and so on and so forth. But the bread and butter is actually SMBs. And if you think about it, like most of those people would have, maybe 2 or 3 codes, not like hundreds of those, right? As in, again, like sticking with that little retail thing, I have my shop. I want to be able to, showcase my online catalog to people. I want to maybe have an appointment booking thing. And, there's a very preset amount of use cases by industry. So the approach that we've taken is actually to produce content around that as well. I think one thing that we pride ourselves on, I'm really proud of my content team, because they write a lot of their content with the use case in mind for those small mom and pop shops, and no matter what industry, right? So we have a whole category of like literally any business you might think of, from real estate to restaurants to those retail things, to DJs, right? So DJs, linking their SoundCloud mixtapes on their business card, putting that code on there, and I've seen really creative use cases. That's why it's so tough to kind of pin it down. What is it actually for? Because like your imagination is kind of the boundary for that, and that's what we've been trying to showcase. Hey, here's a few ideas that we have, but then my family is in the restaurant business. That's why I keep harking back to that, right? Because I understand it a little bit from growing up.
Yeah.
And then I talked to my dad, who runs a few restaurants, and he tells me stuff about how they would use it or how they could use it that I wouldn't even have thought about. You have that techie mindset, but ultimately the QR code is a vehicle to get people that aren't that tech savvy to think creatively about how they could use that tech and bring people to do something, interact with their business in that sense.
It is interesting too, right? And maybe it's a working working backwards, if I'm, company A and my goal is to sell more stuff, right? Understanding what the buyer's journey is and how can I use this QR code to be a vehicle, to be a mechanism to either move them from one phase of the funnel to another, or to, bring them along what I know my buyer's journey typically is, and shorten that sales cycle. Are there specific offers, if we get down to the nitty gritty, right? We've got a brand who's like, hey, I'm a gym and I want more gym, membership signups. I want more leads, right, for my sales team to close. Are there offers that you see working particularly well for maybe non-established brands? Are they financial, like, hey, $25 off, first month free? Are you seeing specific offers like that working well for maybe not established brands?
Yeah. I think so. There's two aspects to. So I think the first thing that you just mentioned is this whole, what is the user journey and where does it break for me to track stuff, right? So you always want to be able, no matter whether it's a 25% off coupon or first month free, whatever it might be, right? And I think, where that code comes in is, let's stay with the fitness center you just mentioned, right? So I'm talking to a trainer, at the desk there. I'm interested in joining. They gave me like a little leaflet with all my information, or these days showed me a screen with all the information, whatever it might be, and they have me scan a QR code, so they know that, okay, X many people, they scan the QR code. So let's say 100 people scan it, right? 30 people sign up for package A and 10 people sign up for package B. The rest drops. That is still better than what I would have had before with just people having a leaflet. Now they type my address into their browser and may close a membership with my gym there. I wouldn't have been able to track that because I didn't have a copy or anything on that. So that is one aspect that I think, no matter whether you're a small business or a large chain advertiser, bridging that gap is core, and then getting some extra data on that. But then when it comes to which offers work, it's so situational. I don't even think that you always have to necessarily offer a discount. It's more about what is the value that you provide to your customers, and do you actually understand what drives them right now? So again, like in this day and age, like, being touchless and making it as easy as possible to interact with your business without, a lot of people are afraid because of all the news and media, going around, and it's I have people in a risk group in my family. I don't want to put them in danger. So as much as I can minimize contacts, I will do that, right? So the business that allows me to do something as contactless as possible and be respectful of the people around me and don't put them at risk, that is already a selling factor. And then on top of that, well, gyms are a tough sell right now because many of them aren't open, right?
Yeah.
But again, if I can bridge that gap between the offline and online experience, I think that's what the biggest competitor for gyms right now, as in Peloton, is doing, right? So the Peloton store around the corner from me has a QR code in the window, right? So they want you to try that stuff out, but they also want you to see those lessons online. It's bridging the gap between what you offer offline, as in like the physical product, for example, for Peloton. But also, if I can now show you also a video of what our courses look like, I've made it multi-experience, multimedia, right? So it doesn't always have to be a hard discount or whatever. It can also be just setting yourself apart from competitors and seeing that you've got an holistic offer, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really great distinction to make, is we're not just throwing QR codes onto advertising and expecting to all of a sudden be able to track 100 new sales.
Yeah.
Right? We've got to consider, all right, who is seeing, who's engaging with and interacting with this piece of advertising just right from jump. And then what's the next thing? Like what is the next step in that customer's journey? Like what is it that they will likely do, and can we shorten that gap? So having consideration, having a thought process behind the QR code, and then understanding, okay, if somebody does scan this, where's it going? Right? What's the quality of the content behind it? If this is directing my social media, is my social media up to date? Like, are these things, have we checked the boxes, right? Have we really given enough thought to this? What are some common misunderstandings around QR codes?
So I think the one that you mentioned is like, do people actually understand what it does?
Right.
So the easiest thing to make your, your scan rate and like, the adoption rate of your QR code better is everyone has a damn black on white QR code, right? use your brand colors, put your logo in the code. So the interesting thing is, you can really, I mean, we provide an editor, but like you can do it obviously yourself with, like graphic design and so on as well. But we have a lot of templates for that. You use your logo, you give us your brand colors, you put it in there, and you have something that matches your brand experience. Now, if you put it on a leaflet, if you put it on a shopping window or whatever it might be, and you also can, let's say, put a little frame around me that says whatever the easiest, call to actions work. Just put scan me on there.
Right,
I'll
tell
say,
them what to do.
Yeah, I'll tell them what the code does, right? Like scan me for more information, or see a video of how this product works, or scan for menu, stick with the restaurant example.
Yeah.
It is flabbergasting how many people are like, okay, I need a QR code now. So I'm going to have this black and white thing that I print out in bad quality, maybe even too small, so it's hard to scan. And I just slap on my table, on my window, whatever. So if you really, you have to see it as an integrated part of whatever you do in advertising as well. And the more it matches your brand language, your brand colors, the more adoption you're going to get. Only
Makes
thing I'll
sense.
say is, don't go too crazy on it, because people should still recognize it as a QR code. That is the only thing that I'll say. You can do crazy stuff with it. I always see those kind of branded things that I wouldn't know that it's a QR code anymore. I've seen one on a I think it was ham or something like that. You don't have that brand in the US, so I won't even mention the brand. But it's literally a package of ham where they put a QR code in a heart on the product packaging. And I mean, I work with those things day by day. I had to do a double take and be like, is that a QR code? So it's just, that is the only limitation I'd say. But apart from that, don't make it boring, and tell people what's behind it, and you'll get more scans.
And so maybe, do you have any interesting data around that? I'm a bit of a data nerd. I'm just curious, like, presumably, right, the QR codes that are brand cohesive and look like an asset or get scanned more, but what sort of neat nuggets do you have on the data behind this?
Yeah, so I mean, like a very, very broad number, right? So it's at least, the minimum uplift that you'll see if you do it properly and put a call to action on it is 4 to 5x. However,
Wow.
I will caveat that, because you're asking a very broad question.
Sure.
You have to understand we have millions of customers across various industries. So it's really, where are you putting this? What is behind the code? Like how well trusted is your brand? So it's very broad. But in broad spectrums, you're definitely going to get significantly more scans if you make it clear what's behind it and make it enticing for people to scan it.
Are there any campaigns that stand out to you from an out-of-home standpoint? We're seeing it more now in out-of-home. I've got a couple pulled up here on my screen here that stood out to me. But anything that's jumped off the table and really grabbed your attention over the last couple months?
Yeah, so I mean, one that this is a nice one, right? So again, like, and I think the one that you're showing there, it says scan me, with that little how would you say, like the little gift wrap on it. So again, that's the easiest call to action that you have, right? You want people to scan it. But still, this could be even done better by saying for what it is. I mean, in this case, it's for this Valentine's dinner show that I can book. I like this as well because it matches the brand colors. It's a very kind of clear bits. Yeah, it's that does a lot of things right, and it's also big enough for people to scan it, right? So even if I think the important thing for out of home or like ambient advertising in that regards, if you put it on a big billboard, the code has to be big enough for someone to scan it from. Okay, now I have to do like meters and feet, but let's say you have to be a few feet apart. No one's gonna stand in front of that billboard on Times Square and fiddle with their phone to scan it. So I think that's important to note, right?
Are there any limitations in terms of size? Like, is there too big for a QR code? Is there too small?
There is too small. I think if I might again like centimeters, inches. So I think it's around 2.5 centimeters, and you need to help me with my inches there, right? So as a European, I always think in metric, but it should be, that is the minimum size, that is 2.5 by 2.5 that you should usually have.
Okay.
For it to be scannable. It could still be scannable. Sometimes you see smaller ones, but if you want to make sure, that's what you should go by, right?
Got it. And too big?
Too big? I haven't heard of something being too big. I mean, the only thing that I would pay attention to is, depending on what tool you use, right? Your the pixel size and so on needs to be big enough to not mess up those corners that you have and the
Mm.
actual the area of the code. But I technically, at least, there's no too big, right? So you need to still be able to obviously like scan it with a camera. I think it's more of like, what is the aspect ratio of how do you envision standing people in front of that? So if it's in a store window, and you do whatever, like 3 feet by 3 feet, right? That is probably fine. Like, it's big, but people, if they stand 3 to 9 feet apart or so, they can quite easily scan that with their phone, right? However, if I use the one that you're just showing there, that is like, on a building and further up, it needs to be even bigger than that to some extent. And it should also not be, hidden or obfuscated in a way that you're, like, most of your users are going to use their by now, the Android or iOS built-in camera to recognize that code, right? Few people still use like, QR code scanner app, as used to be the case, right? So just, do some testing around that. Like, get an iPhone, get an Android device, see if it works. And yeah.
No, it's very cool. And talk to me about this one. I just love this piece. I stole this right off of your LinkedIn page, but this is pretty cool. And this was a campaign that helped artists and with donations. Yeah.
Yeah, so the idea behind that is, it's a mural, and that artist would put a Bitcoin link in that regards behind it. So that code would then lead to, their Bitcoin wallet. You can make a donation. You can also find out more about the artist, obviously, but that's a very creative use case. I've also seen the same thing. We've talked about MP3 a little bit before. I've seen a DJ, have some artistry behind their for their set in a club and stuff like that, also with a QR code behind it that let you download some of their mixes, right? So it's from that artistic standpoint, there's a lot of different ways of getting people to follow you or to buy pieces of you or whatever it might be that you want to achieve.
It's very cool. Christof, where should folks go to learn more about what it is you guys do? If maybe there's a brand listening or a media company who's working with somebody, where can folks connect with you, learn more from you?
Yeah, so it's relatively easy. Our website is qrcodegenerator.com. Easy to remember. And we have, so if you have different businesses, we have 2 sections which are basically QR codes for. Which is, any business type that you may have, that will have some blog articles that give you some ideas of like, how can you use it for your business? And then we have another section called QR codes on. So let's say if you're more in the product side, you're thinking, hey, I want to design this packaging where I want to give, I've seen a lot of vineyards doing that right now, where they say, hey, I want to put this on my bottle of wine and I want to show people what the vineyard actually looks like. Some cool examples there.
Cool.
Typically, right, if you put it on a bottle, you need to think about the curvature a little bit as well, right? So where it's placed on the label, that it's still scannable. So there's a few aspects there, right? So maybe that's one that we forgot just now. If you're doing a billboard and it's, not one of the classic ones, but I'm forgetting the English word now, right? Those round billboards that you still find.
Even the one we just had up for the dinner, it had angled panels on the side, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So test that, check that out, because that can screw it up, right? So if that ratio is like, a little bit off, especially on product packaging, it's just something that I would always test. But we've seen a lot of I know that Cheez-Its had like, a promotion now with the MLS or something like that on the back of their packaging, where you could also scan a QR code to win, tickets to some MLS games. Where I'm like, okay, there's no MLS games right now, so but fine.
But I do like Cheez-Its, so
yeah. So I like Cheez-Its and I like that they have a QR code on it. So that is, by the way, one of the fun sides about this job is like, I've known about QR codes, I've scanned them before, but after taking these jobs, I see them everywhere. It like makes you, go through the world of, and it's exactly that example for out of home, right? You're out of your home, you don't even realize how many QR codes are around you. And once you start taking kind of, pictures or, noting them, you're like, oh, that's a cool use case. And you just start seeing them a lot more.
Right. And for someone who, if there's a QR code on something that I care about, that I'm more likely to, right. Just because we see it and we go, oh, why would someone use that? Well, you're probably not the target customer for that brand or that product, but somebody who is, who's buying Cheez-Its for their 7-year-old son. And he's asking me, hey, daddy, well, like, what's this thing on the back, about soccer? Well, guess what? Dad's going to be scanning the QR code and find it out. So it may not make sense on the surface, but it sounds like there's a lot of ways to use it. Christof, this has been really helpful. And if you found value from it, please share this with somebody else who could benefit. As always, make sure to click the subscribe button down below there in the corner, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you, Tim.
Thanks, Christof.